Hello, Cleveland, and welcome back to another edition of the Dogland Podcast. I am your host, Jackson McCurry. Jack Duffin is joining me today, and Jack, we're finally here. The final conclusion of the off-season roster deep dive.
Yeah, I just feel like you've been counting down this day to get rid of me. To stand by Mr. Landry, Mr. Chubb, and defend their honours. You finally get to get rid of me after this 12 podcast series. But no, it's been really, really good fun. Really interesting debate. Thank you for all you guys listening that have interacted on Twitter, read the articles at dogland.com. It's been genuinely enjoyable. So, loved it.
Nah, Jack. I won't get rid of you, man. You're a vital part of our team here at the Dogland. It's been fun, even though I want to torture you sometimes with the Chubb and Landry hate, or disrespect. I wouldn't say it's even hate, but no, it's been all good fun, and I've really enjoyed this series. But here we are, the final installment of the offseason roster deep dive. Today we're going to focus on special teams, and then Jack has a conclusion at the end, which we'll get to, of course. But Jack, we're looking at special teams, and it wasn't terrible last year, I would say. But we're going into 2021 where we technically don't have a starting kicker right now, and I think we should start right there.
Yeah, so it was okay. And when we talk special teams, we're actually just talking about the three specialists. Obviously, if you read the pieces, there's a lot more emphasis than ever before where we're talking about special teamers. There's loads of good guys on the roster, and that's down to Prefro and Co to decide, hey, who's this slightly bit better between these guys. But my feelings are in there. These are about three specialists, and yeah, starting with the kicker, the one that fans care most about because of fantasy football. But yeah, for me, Cody Parkey's not the guy. I don't mind Cody Parkey coming back for camp, and I'd be surprised if he isn't, unless someone else is desperate to pay him. Then bring him back and sort of give him that opportunity, but they need to do better. And the only one actually under contract is a guy called Matt McCrane. And I had to Google all this because I had no idea he was under contract. So in 2018, he played for Arizona, Pittsburgh, and Oakland. Went 8 for 12 on field goals, 100% of those under 40 yards, and 9 for 9 on extra points. But yeah, maybe it's Matt McCrane and Cody Parkey fighting in camp, but I think adding another body, even if it's UDFA, come in and they compete.
Yeah, definitely. I think they should go in the competition route. McCrane, I think, was here more or less as for COVID reasons. I mean, he was on the practice squad all last season because, in case Parkey were to go down. But I think he'll be here. He's part of the competition. They may bring Parkey back, but there is some interesting names in free agency this offseason at the kicker position. Matt Prater, Steven Gostkowski, Randy Bullock, Mike Nugent, and then our former beloved kicker who Hugh Jackson ran out of town, Zane Gonzalez, is also out there on the market. So maybe the Browns go in and try to get a kicker in free agency, or they go in the draft route, which I'm not saying draft a kicker because, Jack, I remember a couple years back when they drafted
Austin Seibert.
Austin Seibert. I was on your podcast, and I don't think either one of us were happy that they spent a fifth round pick on a kicker.
Yeah, so I'm never for drafting kickers. Even more in sort of the last 2 years, everyone's become a bit sort of unreliable. It wasn't ever so. I don't remember it being as much the case. Even Justin Tucker was all over the place in the playoffs. Even Justin Tucker, and it's always been don't pay a kicker unless they're Justin Tucker. Now even Justin Tucker's bringing it into question. So I've got no issue of sort of committing to a kicker potentially for one season, but I ain't committing to anyone with guaranteed money long term. I'm not interested in doing it. Go cheap, and if your kicker has a mare, cut him and then get another one in. It's ruthless, but quite frankly, I ain't messing around. Bring in a couple of UDFAs if you want. If you think Matt McCrane might be the guy, I don't mind him hanging around. Cody Parkey, I'll bring him back, but I ain't giving him much guarantee because I don't think he'll win the camp battle. So no multi-year deals for the kicker position. I'm not interested in spending a draft pick. Let the UDFAs fight it out in a street brawl.
Oh, that would be entertaining, especially on building the Browns. Have our kickers go into a street fight for the job.
Hell in a cell. What? Can we get that octagon thing and put 6 of them in and open up the doors and let them fight to the death.
Oh, that would be entertaining as hell. When you look at the punter, Jamie Gillan, the Scottish Hammer, he had a great rookie year, Jack, but then 2020, it was like something was not right with him. And I know he was on the injury report quite often throughout the 2020 season, but you know, you think he'll be the punter going into 2021, but it would not shock me if they do bring in competition for him because something just seemed off. It might have been injury, but maybe the Scottish Hammer is losing the touch on his kicks.
Yeah, so I think they'll want to give him another year to see if he can rebound to that level. But the problem is after 3 years, he then becomes a restricted free agent. And are you going to be paying $2.5 million plus onto a kicker on a restricted free agent tender? Are you potentially going to extend him and give him a long-term deal? Unless he wows and you go, I don't mind setting aside $2.5 million a year, and we'll give him a few years because kicking's a bit more stable than punting. But in all honesty, if we're talking $2.5 million for a kicker, $2.5 million extra for a punter, no, I'm willing to take that sort of $4 million and stick that into a starter somewhere else, and let's have $5 million on a defensive back, a defensive tackle for depth. So I'm just not married to punters and kickers because, quite frankly, I don't want to be punting because I believe in Baker Mayfield and I want us driving. Any opportunity we get on 4th and short, we're going for it. We ain't punting. I don't care if we're on our 40-yard line. Go for it. And pretty much my view's the same once we get into field goals and stuff like that. Just go for it. Stop kicking extra points. If you convert an extra point on 95% of the time and you convert 2 points on 55% of the time, the math says you score more points and win more games if you go for 2. So be aggressive. And as we see of any edge in the NFL, the first team to go for it is the one that gets the most benefit. And within 2 to 3 years, everyone's doing it. If you would have said 5 years ago, teams should be going for 3 points nearly every time in the NBA, you'd have been called a nutter. Now everyone's doing it. And if you're not doing it, you're considered a nutter. So these things change. Data becomes more and more prevalent. And an interesting thing reading at sort of the high school level and why this makes such a difference, because teams wouldn't necessarily spend loads of time dedicated to something like 2-point conversions. But they know when they've got you on their schedule, they actually need to set aside extra time to prep for all these different 2-yard conversions, 2-point conversions that might happen. And if you're asking them to do that, then they're not prepping for the rest of the stuff. And that's taken away from their time of looking at what Baker Mayfield does, looking at all this other stuff. So create that problem for teams by doing something different. And it's why Lamar Jackson has his special thing. It's not because it's unstoppable. Teams just don't spend the entire off season preparing for a quarterback like Lamar Jackson. So doing different stuff is really good, and I'm all a fan of it. Let's go for it more on 4th down. Let's go for more touchdowns rather than field goals. For me, a field goal is 4 points lost rather than 3 points earned.
Yeah, absolutely. I feel like it's trending more and more to where teams are going to take more chances with the 2-point conversion just because like the kickers have been so inconsistent, even with the extra points. I mean, as when they pushed it back, like you started to see more misses. And I just feel like teams are going to start going to be wanting to be more aggressive and taking chances on 2-point plays. So it's going to be interesting seeing how that trend will go as the years continue to move forward. We're not going to spend too much time on long snapper just because you can't really judge a guy like this. But the fact that Charlie Hewlett's been here the last 5 years, he's, I think, the second longest tenured Brown at this point behind Batonio, and he's consistent. Like, you never see him make a botch snap. He does his job, and he does it quite well.
So the fact that I reckon over 50% of Browns fans don't know our long snapper's name means he's doing an amazing job, because the only time you ever hear about a name but a long snapper, some of these guys, is when something goes seriously wrong. So Charlie Hewlett, you're my guy. Yeah, he's got another 2 years left in his deal, and quite frankly, they don't need to replace him anytime soon. So long may the Hewlett reign live on.
I have to laugh because I was looking at Facebook memories this morning, Jack, and I actually sent you the screenshot. February 16th, 2017, I put the Cleveland Browns, where they can't find a QB, but they signed their long snapper to make him the highest paid in the league. So, Charlie Hewlett, keep doing what you do, buddy.
He's a stud.
Yes. So, Jack, as we get to our conclusion, and you wrote this in the article over at thedogland.com, which everybody please go check it out. Jack did some incredible work here during this series. You break down the free agent positions, the guys that you target here, and then you talk about the draft as well. So I'm going to give you the floor. You go ahead and conclude this offseason deep dive.
Yeah, so the roster's quite strong. Just from purely a numbers perspective, we are currently committed to one player on the roster after this season. That sounds mad, but that's true. So Myles Garrett is the only player they cannot move on from in next offseason. Just from a contract perspective, that's incredible flexibility. That's not going to last long. We're going to have to commit to lots of guys, but just from that position, we can go any which way. I have us looking at one free agent on the offensive side of the ball all offseason. Whether it's this guy or someone else, I think that they could add someone, and that's Rashard Higgins. I think $9 million over 2 is just a great deal. Go for it. I think we're looking at one decent edge, whether that's JJ Watt and Aquara. They're my guys. Different deals for the pair of them, but that's where I'd look. I'd go and invest in one guy on the interior D-line. I like Solomon Thomas. I think he's got lots of upside there to come in and play 3-tech. Couple of linebackers, I think they'll sign. So it's either KJ Wright or BJ Goodson, and then your depth guy, Malcolm Smith. It's just a perfect one to go back to because he was so good last year. I think they'll bring in a couple of corners. So how they stack this will be interesting. I think it's either Troy Hill or Mike Hilton, and then I think it's a depth guy. So nothing too sexy. Your Breelands, your Terrence Mitchell, your Gary Conley, Jason Verrett possibly. Could be an option they go with as sort of a depth piece. Richard Sherman, I can't see it. Crazy things have happened. And then, a free safety. One big name will come in. Marcus Williams, I think, just fits the mold for what they're looking for. So much better than everyone else. And then, Malik Hooker, Quisky Tart, someone that can know the scheme and sort of be a bit of depth. Looks good. In terms of the draft, I've only got 4 options that I can realistically see on day one. Wide receiver, edge, cornerback, or trade down. I can't see them doing anything else. Day 2, based on what you haven't done before, if you trade down, you've got 4 picks here. Wide receiver, edge defender, interior defender, linebacker, cornerback, safety. So it's pretty much anywhere on the defense and wide receiver, which I don't think is a surprise to anyone. And then, you're quite diverse. I break down the high day 3, late day 3. Go check out the article, dogland.com. That's all there. You've got a few guys that are going into their final year. So I break down all of if you wanted to do their deals of cutting and trading guys or whose deal expires after this season, all of that's broken down. So every player on a deal, $2 million and above, is all there. So you've got what do you do with Landry, OBJ, Richardson, Batonio, Tretter, Keenum, Hunt, Njoku, Hubbard, Chubb, Billings, Claiborne, Hooper. All of those guys, it's all different stuff in there. So check that out. Just write it all down there. I'm not saying, hey, you have to do anything with these guys, but that's all the contracts that they could potentially move away from and do different stuff. And then I've got my 53 projected. It's one of the more recent ones I've done. So it's got some interesting options in there. I present what I do, and I think it's a fun exercise for everyone. Just whether you draw it out for yourself at home and create them, break down your starters. So there's more starters than 11, and that's perfectly fine, just the way snaps will break down. And then on the defense, 9 starters, because you'll rotate between the amount of linebackers, corners, safeties, you only actually need 9 penciled in guys that are going to be your definitive starters. But no, it's gone through the second iteration. So there was one I released on the 2nd of Feb, and now the most recent one, I think I did on Valentine's Day, which is the one in the article. It might have been the day before Valentine's Day. It might be the day after. Who knows when it came out? But that had Solomon Thomas coming in instead of Sheldon Rankins. And rather than Brashard Breeland, I added Troy Hill. So some interesting discussion and ideas. I think there'll be one or two tough decisions made by this front office that fans will immediately go, no, why you can't do that. But the upside is long term. I don't think this is a front office that goes, hey, let's try to win for 2 years and then we'll go into sort of not a rebuild, but retooling and sort of moving loads of stuff around and sort of have a 1 year where we might just make the playoffs. I think they're much more committed to going, let's get into the playoffs all of the next 6 years unless Baker goes down, and then we'll deal with everything as and when it comes. So I think they're much more rational than some fans will want. But quite frankly, if in 6 years' time we're talking about we've made the playoffs 5 of the 6 years at least, and that's the next 6, that's not counting last year, fans will be a lot happier than if we got 2 more years in the playoffs, then 2 years out of the playoffs, and then 2 years back in. I want to be in the playoffs every year. Let me watch January football, and quite frankly, what happens when we get there? There's a lot of luck and other things, and just because you don't like a move because it might impact 2021, these guys are looking at the big picture. I want this front office, I want this quarterback, I want this head coach and the whole coaching staff to be here long term, and that means sustaining winning. So yeah, while hey, we were only a few snaps from the championship game, yeah, just because you run it back doesn't mean you're going to get to that. That's the mistake so many teams make. We have to be rational and ruthless. Look at the New England Patriots. If you want to look at what paying guys that makes you feel good, you're not looking at the teams that are constantly getting to the playoffs, constantly winning competitions, because it's about being, hey, is this guy going to make us better over the next 2-3 years? And value, and that's the explicit thing we want to get to, is providing value above the contract they sign. And that's really tough for Myles Garrett. Take nothing away from Myles Garrett. Myles Garrett has the hardest job of any Brown next season to provide value above his deal. He has to be in the discussion for a defensive MVP to provide value. Some of these other guys are really going to struggle to deal their contract. Joel Bitonio, he plays like a 16 million guard and he's only on 10 million. Great, that's 6 million value that we can put somewhere else and we're getting for our team, and that's 6 million of value closer towards winning a Super Bowl. We need that everywhere. And that's the really tough thing. It's you don't pay a guy for what he's done in the past. You've got to pay for it going forward. So these guys are going to be ruthless. Don't worry. When you feel they're being ruthless, they're probably being perfect. And you'll sit there in 2 years' time and go, why the hell was I saying we couldn't live without this player, wherever he might be, because you get rid of him and you play better.
All fantastic stuff, Jack. I mean, you have killed it over this last month on the site, on the podcast, man. We are truly thankful you're a part of our team here at the Dogland, man. Just great stuff. Everybody, please go check this out. Although, Jack, as I'm looking at my phone while you were talking, you might have to make some alterations to your projected 53 because J.J. Watt is strongly considering signing with the Cleveland Browns as of this morning. So as we're recording, so might have to make some changes, which could be some big ones for sure if it all comes to fruition.
Well, if it does happen, and who knows, it might have happened by the time you listen to this podcast.
This is true.
Then that's Romeo Okwara out and JJ Watt in, which I don't mind. I'm happy with that move as long as it comes down to JJ Watt, what you sign him to. At first I said, hey, I think it's going to be 45 million over 3, and I'm not interested in paying that. If we're down to 26 over 2 with sort of incentives can get him up to 28 and a half, even 29, I'm cool with that. Yeah, it's risky because, hey, the dude's got an injury history, but I don't mind that risk. It probably does mean the end of Sheldon Richardson, guys. So just to let you know, moves have consequences. It's why I bang on about opportunity cost. You pay A, you don't get B. But quite frankly, on cap numbers, would I rather have JJ Watt or Richardson? I don't think that's a hard choice.
No, not at all. I think JJ Watt, despite the injury history, he's still playing as one of the best edge rushers in the league. He's one of the best edge rushers of all time. Just what he could bring on the field, off the field to the Browns. I mean, it would be a huge acquisition. They're saying, according to the reports, it's Mary Kay Cabot that reported it. The reasons why he wants to come to Cleveland: money, obviously. Guys want to get their money. Can't fault him to a degree, but also, and this is something because of what we've seen over the last couple of years, Jack. He sees the Browns as a team that he has a shot to win a Super Bowl with. And I think that's not far-fetched. I think the Browns are right there within striking distance to contend for a Super Bowl. And if we can get J.J. Watt, I feel like that would be a good added boost to a team that's already on their way up.
No, for me, it was the Packers just always felt like the natural home, just because if you look at the conferences, they've got an easier chance to win a Super Bowl because you're looking maybe Tampa Bay, Packers. Is there any other teams you get that excited about in that side? Whereas all the talent of the league, it's almost 4 years ago flipped on its head, is now all in the AFC. So that was the reason why I just felt it made more sense. But quite frankly, hey, I ain't going to complain if JJ Watt comes here on that 26, 29 million. I just don't want to be paying 45 over 3.
Definitely understandable. And if the Browns do sign JJ Watt, we will be back with an emergency episode if it's before Friday when this episode is dropping. So be on the lookout for that if news does come down in the coming days. And stay tuned to the dogland.com. And as I plug the dogland.com, go back and look at everything Jack did on the offseason deep dive. We broke down every position group on here on the podcast, but also Jack's fantastic writing over at the dogland.com. Jack, as we get on out of here, go ahead and plug your Twitter and everything else you got going.
Yeah, so it's Jack Duffin, DUFFIN. The whole thing's open, so if you want to send a DM, you want to send a question, cap related, contracts, roster building, happily answer it. Tweet at me, DMs, whatever you want. But no, thank you so much for having me, guys. Not just part of the podcast, part of the website. It's a really good outlet for me to write, and I really enjoy it. So no, thanks for having me on board. And where can people find you?
You can find me on Twitter at JackMcCurry08. You can follow the Dogland at the Dogland on Twitter and on Facebook as well. As we get on out of here, until next time, Browns fans, go Browns.
Go Browns.